Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. One of my viewers wanted to know why some, or even most, baby boomers get emotional satisfaction for working for someone else rather than going out here and starting a business, and also wanted to know why they don't teach their kids to go out here and be entrepreneurs and start their own business. Well, the reason why many baby boomers got emotional satisfaction for working for someone else rather than going out here and thinking about being an entrepreneur is due to the values that they were taught by their parents and their grandparents. Now, when it comes to many of the baby boomers, they lived very well compared to their parents and their grandparents, the greatest generation and silent generation, and the generation that came before them, because many of those past generations had to deal with struggles as related to the transitioning American economy. Now, in the late 19th century, the American economy was changing from an agricultural business that was basically run by single entrepreneurs to a industrial business that was run by rich, wealthy individuals and entities that would be known as corporations. Now, when it came to this whole transition, it changed the way America worked, because when we had the agricultural economy, most Americans basically were sole proprietors. They basically had their own farms or their own shops, and these shops were basically, family owned, and people basically ran those businesses all by themselves. However, as we got into manufacturing, what happened with the economy is that we started to have an industrial business, and instead of people working at their own businesses on their own property, they began to move to the cities to work for these companies. And as they worked for these companies, it was something people just felt that they had to do in order to make better money than working on the farms, because usually working on the farms was, again, something that was considered to be extremely high risk, because you could have a crop fail, or you could have a drought or some situation. And if you were a shop owner, you could go through rough periods where the shop owner would have to struggle to try to not only pay the bills for the business, but also pay for the bills for the home, and struggle to take care of all of the children that they had and everything that went with both the business and the home. And that in and of itself was a hard struggle for a lot of people. And as the Industrial Revolution came along and people were able to get on some of these jobs, they were able to get a sense of some economic security, because the business owners would basically wind up paying most of their bills. And as these businesses had to deal with organized labor, such as unions, this provided people with a sense of job security, and also provided them with a sense of economic security, because they would have standardized wages that would allow them a quality of life and a life that they would be able to live. And people were fairly stable until about the time of the Great Depression. Now, the Great Depression had a major impact on how Americans worked in this country. The Great Depression, basically, because it led to extreme poverty all across the country and even in other parts of the world. What happened with the Great Depression is that those generations that grew up in the Great Depression, such as the silent generation and the greatest generation, they basically grew up with this whole poverty that basically traumatized them, and it traumatized them to the point where they had to deal with things like not having enough food to eat or have food in the house, not be able to have clean clothes in some places because they couldn't afford to buy basic necessities such as soap, and some couldn't even afford a place to stay and had to live in the streets, and others had to travel hundreds of miles in order to get work that paid pennies on the dollar. And all of these traumas and hardships basically devastated people and traumatized and emotionally scarred them to the point where as we were coming into World War II, a lot of people were just as we were coming into World War II and factory work came along. A lot of people were basically grateful for those factory jobs, and they were also grateful for the military conscription because this allowed them some economic stability. And with that military conscription and the factory jobs giving people economic security, this is what gave some people a sense of gratitude for basically being able to have a way to make a living that allowed them to basically be able to live a decent life where they could have at least a roof over their head, food on their table, and a place to stay. And as they were able to have just these basic amenities, this is what gave some people some satisfaction for working for someone else, because they felt grateful for what they had. And when they felt grateful for what they had, they wanted their kids to have better. And that's where the baby boomers learned how it was better to work for someone else, because when it came to these companies, they could give somebody a sense of economic stability and allow them to be able to get at the minimum the basics, and at the minimum be able to get these basics. And from getting the basics, they could go on to further go up the hierarchy of needs as related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where they could go out here and start working towards personal satisfaction and self-actualization. That's what the parents of the baby boomers wanted for their kids. That's what the silent generation and the greatest generation wanted for their kids, was to be able to go out here and be able to live a better life than they had, and be able to go on this quest for emotional satisfaction. And they believe that the way they could get that satisfaction is, one, through going out here and getting a better education than they had, because many parents who came from those two previous generations before the baby boomers didn't have that chance to go to school and be able to get that higher learning that they thought would allow them to be able to climb the ladders of what corporate America. And others thought that if they went out here and be able to get that education, they'd be able to get those better jobs that would allow them to have that personal satisfaction in their lives and be able to live as well as those who were the wealthy. That's what the parents instilled in their children, to go and work for someone else, because working for yourself was a very stressful thing. Working for yourself was very stressful, especially in the age of agribusiness, because in the age of agribusiness, again, there were so many variables that could basically just wind up making a person poor. I mean, there were so many variables that could make a person poor, such as there being a drought that could basically make it where you couldn't grow any crops, or basically a ship winding up sinking and you not being able to get the materials that you need, or the goods and services, or in the case sometimes as stuff is getting transported, it could get damaged, and basically then there was no insurance to cover things, so you basically had to eat those costs. Or there could be highwaymen or robbers that could get your shipments. So there was a lot of variables in place before modern times, and a lot of people, again, were basically in those times basically just struggling to make ends meet. Sometimes you could pull a profit depending on the year if you were an entrepreneur, but being an entrepreneur was basically frowned on for a lot of American families, because many wanted their families to, again, have that economic security. And the easiest way to get economic security was to work for one of these big businesses or corporations, which usually pulled profits every year. And with these corporations and big businesses pulling profits every year, and there being easier access to getting one of these jobs than basically having to beg somebody for an apprenticeship, or hope that this guy was doing well enough to be able to take on people, because with small businesses, again, it depends on how the business is doing, if that business can go out here and be able to hire other people. And again, there's just so many variables, but there are less variables. And again, baby boomers were taught, hey, go get that job with that corporation, go get that job with that big business, because you'll get the base security. And from the base security, what you can do is start working on meeting your needs. And you can also, as you're working to meet your needs, you can then make connections with those who had higher social status and higher economic status, as they could go out here and meet those kind of people. They could basically look to meet their emotional needs at the job, and they thought they could get that emotional satisfaction from these jobs. That's what many of the baby boomers thought they could get, and that's how we got the whole group of baby boomers who eventually in the 80s became the yuppies, or young urban professionals. And these young urban professionals, basically, they wanted to go out here and work at one of these corporations because it would not only, again, meet that base level of economic security, but it would also allow them to elevate their high social status, because saying that you worked for a corporation basically got people to talk about you and made you a higher value person. Especially if you were a man, you could basically become a high value man by working in certain positions at different companies, and that would open the door for you to be able to get the attention and access to fathers who would introduce you to their daughters in a lot of cases. And as you would get introduced to these daughters, you could basically go out here and meet quality women at the time. This is before the feminist movement. You could, again, in the 60s, meet a quality woman and make her a wife. But after that, you could still go out here and meet women who are on the move as related to their career, and both of you could go out here and build a family. So there were a lot of benefits to going out here and working for someone else. For most of the baby boomers, I mean, there were benefits in job security, because when you worked at these companies, you basically worked there for life in a lot of cases. Or if you did move around, you were able to move up the ladder at different companies. You could go out here and network and become a part of larger social circles. And you could also go out here and meet higher status women, so you didn't have to deal with the women who were of low class or ill repute. You didn't have to deal with those kind of women, and you didn't have to chase women, because women would be chasing you. So a lot of guys would go out here, and a lot of women would go out here and look to go to these jobs, because it was a hub where they could go out here and get not only their economic needs, but their social needs met. And that was a benefit for them that they could get as related to working for one of these corporations or businesses. And they would get some satisfaction, because they'll be able to live a very nice life, and they'll be able to live that nice life as related to two things, and do better than their parents, do better than their parents economically, and be able to do this in some cases, and do so well that they could even go out here and even start their own businesses on the side if they wanted. Now, they didn't want to teach their kids this because the jobs provided security, and I know this as a Gen Xer. I was taught, again, to go get one of these jobs the same way, but that just is the way people were taught. They were taught to go get a job because having a business is a lot of work, and I know this from my own personal experience building my own business for the last 15 years, building the SJS Direct imprint. I know that it's a lot of risk and a lot of long, hard days and a lot of long, hard nights where you're doing 12, 16-hour days, and sometimes you're doing 12, 16-hour days, and there are periods where you're not going to make any money. This is what I'm running into right now, where you have months where I haven't sold any books. I mean, October, and it was one of the worst months I've had. So I know how hard it is for an entrepreneur. And again, a lot of people deter their kids from being entrepreneurs because they don't want them to have it hard, because the first couple of years for a business can be the rough ones. And in that time, you have no money coming in, you have bills piling up. And a lot of people, again, get discouraged from looking to go out here and start a business, because starting a business is hard work, and you don't see a payoff until maybe years later. And a lot of parents don't want to see their kids go through that suffering as related to starting a business. And that's why a lot of boomers didn't go out here and push their kids in that road. Now, there's some emotional satisfaction for running and starting your own business, but there's a lot of stress that goes into those years because sometimes it's hard to, again, have the customers, and sometimes the customers just walk away, or sometimes the business winds up peaking and there's no other place for the business to go. And sometimes you wind up in all of these kinds of, again, rough and stressful periods. And a lot of parents, again, don't want their kids to suffer through all of that. So they go out here and look to tell their kids, hey, go work for one of these companies, because working for someone else is a lot safer and more secure than working for yourself. Because working for yourself, while there is some personal satisfaction, again, they trying to get things stable is very hard. It's hard to go out here and try to sell to people and try to convince them of your product. It's hard to get people into being interested in your product. It's hard to get people excited about a product that you're excited about. And it's hard to build networks and connections that will help you generate sales. I know this because it's hard to generate sales and sales leads. It's a lot of work to go out here and do this. So many parents, again, because they love their children, they don't want to see their children suffer. So they'll tell them, okay, if you want to go out here and do a thing, go out here and make sure you have a full-time job that will cover your expenses, then do that thing on the side. I mean, it's not like they're deterring them completely from being an entrepreneur, but they're telling them, hey, if this doesn't work, you'll have something to fall back on. That's what many boomer and maybe even Gen X parents try to tell their kids. Not just go for all of this, put all of your eggs in one basket, because in today's world is a lot even harsher than the one of the farmer and the shopkeeper, where the farmer and the shopkeeper, if they had a rough period, they could possibly ride it out and hopefully be able to find another period of prosperity. But in this period, if you don't have anything, it's basically done at that point. So I look at this, and again, why people, they go out here and big boomers got that satisfaction is because of all the suffering their parents went through, and their parents wanted them to have a better world. But the great irony is that as the boomers had their better world, they made it harder for us Gen Xers and many other people like millennials and Gen Z and Generation Alpha by having these rigorous and unrealistic standards for qualifications for the job, and that made it harder for everyone out here as related to things. So it just like the boomers, again, they got their satisfaction. Sadly, other generations haven't been able to get satisfaction from the world of work, and that world of work has basically become a lot harder these days. Because, again, many of the boomers, while they got out here and their parents spoiled them and made things good for them, they didn't appreciate what they had, and they didn't appreciate what they had to the point where they would look to give back to the next generation. And that's what makes the entire whole process of the job market very difficult, because many boomers don't consider you having actual work experience unless you've worked at a company, and they don't see people working for themselves, as having any value. They don't see people working for themselves as having any value, because the only people they value are those who work for a corporation, namely a white corporation, because they believe that person has prestige, because that's the prestige they were taught to see as having value. And they were also taught that that person who worked at that company was somebody that could be trusted. This is what they were taught. Whereas a person they were taught who works on their own might be suspect because there's no verifiable sources, even though that person may have results like I do on Amazon.com, where I can basically show all the books I have written. I can show all the articles that I've done for different companies. I mean, a lot of these boomers, basically, they don't think you're working unless you work for someone else. And that's the mindset that basically has stalled the job market, because people from Gen X onward, we've had to learn how to work differently because of the boomers' crazy stipulations that person must have 20 different degrees, because that's what their parents taught them, that a college degree means that somebody is committed, means somebody finishes things, and somebody is accomplished. However, from someone who has worked with people with college degrees, I can tell you a lot of them are the first ones to quit a job. They're the ones who aren't very committed, and they are not as enthusiastic as people think they are. a lot of them put on an act to make it look like they're interested and put on a good front, and they use prestige as a facade. And again, they use this because they want to keep the job market secure for them and not make it open to anybody else. And that's one of the reasons why America's economy is stalling right now, because many of these people's selfishness and greed have kept people from being able to grow in the businesses and the job market. And sadly, what the boomers have done in their quest to get emotional satisfaction is create a fiefdom in corporate America, a fiefdom in corporate America, which keeps it from working for other people other than themselves, and basically makes it where people are now having to go out here and start their own businesses because they can't get jobs at many of these corporations right now. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can drop a donation for a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if I can do research on a subject, I will make that video for you. And you can also continue to help this channel out by picking up some of the books on the SJS Direct imprint. Now, I've been having a slow last couple of months for sales, and I would greatly appreciate it if you guys would head over to Amazon.com or one of the other online booksellers to pick up a book or two, because that's how I help stay on the air. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I came on the air, is to sell many of my books and share my writing with other people. And it's been a lot harder to do that these days and be able to keep myself going. So I'm asking everybody again to go out here and pick up one of the books and help keep my small business going, because a lot of small business people, again, we have these rough periods, and these rough periods can be the difference between us being in business and us being out of business. And that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks in a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business at paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.